out, for sure.
WENJ HD Millville, Atlantic City, a Town Square media station serving all of South Jersey. This is 97.3 ESPN. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Oh, what a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. And we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show. Just follow 97.3 ESPN on social media. Back in the house on a Monday. Got a lot to get to this hour. Kevin McCormick will join us coming up at 6:20 as the Sixers are back in action tonight after a roller coaster weekend, an embarrassing Friday, an impressive win Saturday. Now they play the Mavericks, a team that also is very talented, but they've hit some more rough times than the 76ers have. So we'll get with Kevin about what's going on with the Sixers tonight as you hear them 7:30, Tom McGinnis on the call right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. But before we get to the Sixers talk, we got to get to the Eagles in the NFL draft. So we're in a situation right now where as we get closer and closer to the draft, it's almost like people are drawing battle lines at this point. People are drawing lines in the sand where it's like, well, you're either for or against drafting this or that player. And I just want to lay out there's a lot of talent in this draft. Before I get to anything specifically, I don't think you can per se go wrong with any specific player, but I will tell you that there is something to be said for the fact that, let me tell you, man, it's a problem if you're not open-minded about some of this talent in this draft. You know, I feel like as the longer I've sat in here with Mike Gill over the years at 97.3 ESPN, listening to the Sports Bash, the more I find that you could tell there's a major difference between the person who understands that there's NFL talent and the person who I just want to accept that there is other talent except for the guy that they want. They're two different kinds of people, and they're completely unreconcilable. It's like the argument about the analytics versus the football guys. And that's part of the problem with the Eagles. You know, if you're in a situation where you're constantly arguing about, you know, which system is the better system to evaluate talent, then you're both going to be wrong. It's not that the football guys are right or the analytics guys are right. The problem is that neither side wants to hear the other out. It's like politics. Neither side wants to actually have a conversation. They just want to scream and yell the whole time and shake their fist at the sky and scream, just as loud as they can with as many expletives as possible. So we could have a conversation here on 97.3 ESPN about this stuff, but I can't promise you that what we are saying is what's going to be done, which is why I try as much as possible to be objective. And part of me being objective is if I'm the Eagles and if I'm trying to be honest about this draft, there's a couple things you specifically need. I've heard Jeff Mosher mention multiple times about the best player available. And I'm very conflicted about that concept because the best player available is not always the guy that is the best player for you. You know, if the best player available on your draft board is a quarterback, but your starter is Aaron Rodgers, I'm not going with the quarterback. I'm sorry. I just can't. If your best player available is a running back, but your starting running back is Saquon Barkley, and it's the first or second round, I'm probably not drafting a running back. And that's where this conflict between the football guys and the analytic guys gets ridiculous because neither one of them wants to admit that either side can make a good point. This was Jeff Mosher earlier in the Sports Bash about the analytics guys versus the football guys.
It's a difficult marriage. It's an uneasy marriage because you have two groups of people that don't necessarily come up through the respective sport in the same way and don't necessarily view it the same way. And sometimes one side's right, sometimes the other side's right. It's hard to get them to meet in the middle because they're literally looking at the same thing through a different lens.
If you're looking at the same thing through a different lens, you're never going to agree. And that's a huge problem. So I can't solve that issue for the Eagles. I can just tell you it is an issue. You know, people want to take sides on whose report is right and whose report is wrong. I'm not going to sit here and play that game because I think there's a little bit of truth in everything. So as I sit here today, as I wrote it at 973ESPN.com, or you can check it out on the 973 ESPN mobile app, I'm a big believer in going for cornerback. I've taken that position. Now, I don't know if that's an analytics position. I don't know if it's a football guy position. I don't know what that means. But what I do know is what I see with my two eyes. I see a division that has a lot of talent at receiver. Darius Slay can't guard everybody. I have one legitimate NFL outside starting corner. And that's it. Kevon Seymour, Michael Jacquet, Craig James, Avonte Maddox, Jamison Houston, Graylin Arnold. These guys are not starting outside corners. Some of them are barely NFL players. Some of them are only NFL players because the Eagles have no depth behind them to take their jobs. But yet people are still screaming and pounding the table that they have to get Devonta Smith. I'm sorry, but I can't vibe with that. Wide receivers can be found anywhere in the draft. They're like running backs. Unless you're the cream of the top of the best of the best. Unless you're Jamar Chase or you're a Calvin Johnson or a Julio Jones, the majority of wide receivers are all kind of lumped into the same groupings. You're very good, above average, average, or below average. There's only a handful of guys who are the best of the best at what they do. So for me, when I hear people say the Eagles need a playmaker, like Jeff Kerr from CBS Sports was telling Mike Gill earlier, or when I hear people over the weekend saying things like the Philadelphia Eagles haven't drafted fill-in-the-blank players since X date. To me, I don't care about that stuff because what that stuff is you're basing a decision in 2021 on something that happened or didn't happen years ago. What happened or didn't happen 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago was then. This is now. And if you're the Eagles, you got to pick the best players for your team. Not the best player available every time. Not the guy the analytics say. Not the guy the football guys say. You need to draft football players that make sense for your football team. I spoke with Eric Edholm of Yahoo Sports over the weekend on Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN. And I asked him, who should the Eagles, position-wise, be targeting? This is what he said.
I think with the Eagles, it's really interesting to try to guess what their positional needs are. I would suggest cornerback has to be up there. Maybe wide receiver, although they've invested pretty heavily in recent drafts at that spot too. So that could maybe knock it down just a little bit, as an edge rusher or, a safety in play, possibly.
You know what he said about wide receiver? All they've invested in the last few years. Think about what they have invested in the last few years. They drafted 3 wide receivers last year. They drafted J.J. Arcega-Whiteside the year before. And then the year before that, they drafted Dallas Goedert, who's not an actual receiver, but he's a pass receiving target in the offense. So do you really need to draft a wide receiver in the first round? I don't think so. There are going to be receivers to be found later in the draft. There are other receivers out there that could be found. This was Eric Edholm on who's some of those receivers who could be found late in the first round into the second round of the draft. These are guys that I think are just as good of NFL prospects as both Alabama receivers. Not because I think little of the Alabama receivers, but because I think because they play for Alabama, they've got a lot more screen time, a lot more attention than some of these other guys have.
A couple who are on that first, second sort of border right now. Kadarius Toney, the shifty slot guy from the kind of the jack of all trades from the Gators. Rashad Bateman from Minnesota. I think he slips in around 1, but kind of borderline. And then Terrace Marshall from LSU, another big guy who can run and had incredible touchdown production at LSU with and without Joe Burrow too.
So you don't need to stay at 6 or good at 12 to get a receiver, unless you desperately want Jamar Chase, and you should have stayed at 6. But for whatever reason, the Eagles traded down, which is why I tend to think that it makes sense that they would go corner there or some sort of defensive player. Listen, I won't be mad if they draft Micah Parsons. I'm with Jeff Mosher and Adam Capital in the Inside the Birds podcast. I don't think it's going to happen because the Eagles have a history of not drafting linebackers that high, but I wouldn't be mad because they need defensive help. This team has spent so much money and draft capital on the defensive line, at the same time sacrificing the depth of their linebackers and their secondary. Your 2 starting linebackers, if the season started right now, is an undrafted free agent and a free agent signee. Eric Wilson, you signed in free agency. Alex Singleton, you brought in as an undrafted free agent. That doesn't tell me a lot. Except for that you haven't spent any type of young investment on linebacker. And the Eagles might say, well, we drafted Davion Teller and Sean Bradley. Yeah, 2 guys who need about another year or 2 of grooming before they're 100% ready for full NFL time and speed, especially considering the fact that there was no OTAs, no regular offseason to speak of this year. Eric Edholm on why it makes sense for the Eagles to go potentially corner in the first 2 rounds, as I've been advocating here on 97.3 ESPN.
If you go with an outside guy like Horner Surtain first, it wouldn't upset me or shock me if they came back with a nickel like Aaron Robinson from Central Florida, like Elijah Molden from Washington. You mentioned Samuel. He played outside a lot, but some teams will look at that size and say, okay, he's better off in the nickel. But that'd be a cool story too. Dad and son playing from the same team. That'd be pretty fun. But, with guys like Kevon Seymour and Avonte Maddox and, Michael Jackett or whatever, there's just not that many options. And in this league, you need 3, 4, 5 corners to feel good about the comfort at that position.
And I certainly don't feel comfortable about the law form of Seymour, Jackett, Maddox, Arnold, and whoever else you want to, James, whoever else you want to throw in there. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Text board is open at 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. Also, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show here on 97.3 ESPN, like Jeff Bone and Pookie. Chiming in on YouTube says, whatever happened before is irrelevant at this point. You're 100% right. I don't care what the Eagles did 20, 30 years ago. I can't let the past dictate the present. I mean, that's completely irrational. These people who constantly want to say, well, why should you do this? Well, because they haven't done it in this long. You can't keep pointing to what happened before and live your life based on that. You have to move on. You got to find some other player. You got to find some other reason to do something. Okay, you might have drafted a certain style of player for a very long time. This is a new coaching staff. This is a new situation. You got to do different things. Now, I can't promise you that that's what's going to happen. I'm just saying that's what I think what should happen. At the end of the day, the Eagles are going to sink or swim based on what happens with 12th overall. That'll dictate what they do for the next 2 years, because they have 11 picks this year and potentially 3 first-round picks next year. 11 overall picks this year is a lot. And then you might be able to go out and get even more top tier talent next year. Or you could package those picks and move up in the draft if the quarterback situation doesn't work out, or you have a situation where, hey, what if a guy like, I told you, what if you got a freak pass rusher available like Kayvon Thibodeau and you're on the outside looking in on getting that guy? I'm not going to pass him up. Well, that'd be like saying no to Chase Young or Nick Bosa or any of those kind of, TJ Watt, those guys who are just world records. I understand that offense wins fantasy football, but I'm trying to win a Super Bowl here. That's my fantasy football championship. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get to more of your text a little bit later this hour at 609-403-0973. But coming up next, we'll check on the Sixers as they take on the Mavs tonight. It's Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons versus Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis tonight at 7:30 on 97.3 ESPN. And joining us on the other side, Kevin McCormick, our Sixers beat writer for 97.3 ESPN.com. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle City.
It's the 2021 NFL Draft exclusively on 97.3 ESPN. Who will the Eagles take with the 12th pick?
With the 12th pick, Philadelphia Eagles select.
Tune in to 97.3 ESPN to find out. Thursday, April 29. Round 1 coverage begins at 7 p.m. It's the 2021 NFL Draft, and it's only on South Jersey's exclusive radio home for Philadelphia Eagles football. 97.3 ESPN.
At Ocean First Bank, our first thought is you. We put you first in all we do. Community banking for a century. We treat you like your family. Whatever you need, whatever you dream, let's make it a reality. Ocean First Bank, putting you first.
For nearly 120 years, we've offered our business lending customers the personal and professional integrity we demand for our own business. Your success is our success. Now, more than ever, it matters where you bank. Your business matters to us.
Whatever you need, whatever you dream, let's make it a reality. Ocean First Bank, putting you first.
Learn more at oceanfirst.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Opportunity Lender.
If you're an athlete or live an active lifestyle, aches and pains can be part of the game. That's where Trifecta Therapeutics comes into play. Trifecta Therapeutics is a premier sports rehab physical therapy center located centrally for anyone in South Jersey, right in Glassboro. Whether you're a weekend warrior or a finely tuned athlete, they treat the pros and the Joes. To find out more about Trifecta Therapeutics and how they can help you, check out trifectatherapeutics.com.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers back in action tonight, taking on the Dallas Mavericks. You can hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, our Sixers coverage on 97.3 ESPN being brought to you by Trifecta Therapeutics in Glassboro, South Jersey's premier sports rehabilitation and physical therapy center, treating the pros and the Joes. Visit them online at trifectatherapeutics.com. Joining us right now on the Boardwalk kind of hotline to talk more about the 76ers as they continue another road trip is our own Kevin McCormick, live on virtual living color here on 97.3 ESPN. As all guests, like I said, he appeared on the Boardwalk kind of hotline. Kevin, are you ready for Luka versus, I guess, Ben tonight? And then Porzingis versus Embiid? I feel like both of those are just bizarre mismatches, honestly, if we really draw them up as if this was like the NBA Jam game where they're 2-on-2, this would be a ridiculous matchup. But how you doing?
I'm doing good. About yourself? The whole Simmons-Luka thing should be fun to watch. I feel like it was kind of the key storyline when these teams first met was how well Simmons did on Luka Doncic. And we've seen in the past that when these kind of big-time superstar matchups come up, Simmons really, kind of turns on that gear. So I think this game being flexed to national television, getting a chance to show again what he could do on Luka, I think we're going to see a very strong defensive performance from Ben Simmons.
Do you think that at some point Ben Simmons is going to be more respected for his defense, or will the whole world continue to hate him because he doesn't score 30 points a night?
I sure hope so. I think it still just has to take some time, as crazy as it sounds. Even with a guy like Kawhi Leonard, he didn't really burst on the scene and be known for his defensive abilities until he had that huge defensive showcase against LeBron James in the finals when he was with San Antonio. So maybe it'll take something like that on a grand stage for Simmons to be kind of universally respected. But in terms of skill and versatility, there really isn't another defender like him. Doc Rivers says it on the regular, that he goes out and he defends 1 through 5. It really doesn't matter what kind of defensive matchup it is. Ben Simmons is catered for it. And we haven't really ever seen a defender like that, where most times it's your best defender is guarding the best wing player or the best guard. While with Ben Simmons, it's just he's going to go guard the opposing team's best player, whether he's a 6'2" point guard like Trae Young or a 6'11" center in, Rudy Gobert, like earlier in the season when Embiid was out.
When you think about also this Sixers team, I mean, listen, I said it earlier, they were completely embarrassing, all right, on Friday night. Friday night was a complete embarrassment. Saturday, it was like, okay, that's the Sixers team I know. So, Kevin, which version of the Sixers show up tonight? Is it the team from Friday night or the team from Saturday night?
I would have to say the team from Saturday, just because even after how the players spoke after Friday, they seemed like they had let themselves down. And although in the past there's been that kind of Achilles heel of the Sixers team of kind of playing down to opponents at times, we've seen it this year as well with situations like the Cleveland Cavaliers pulling off 2 wins against the Sixers. But they really seemed beat up, and they really seemed that they understood the mishap that was Friday night and their lack of energy, and they did completely turn it around against OKC. So I think they're going to come into this Dallas Mavericks matchup, look to end the road trip on a high note and keep building that momentum to just try and erase that bad performance that was New Orleans on Friday night.
By the way, it looks like Porzingis is going to be out, but Maxi Kleber will play tonight for the Mavericks. So Kleber obviously nowhere as good as Porzingis, but at least him filling in for Porzingis will give them at least a little bit more of a scoring opportunity out there tonight. So Kevin McCormick joining us here on the Boardwalk kind of hotline here on 97.3 ESPN at Kevin MCC NBA on Twitter for all your Sixers and NBA coverage. Kevin, when you think about also this team moving forward, they're going to finally come back home for a couple games. How important is it going to be for them to just get away with a win tonight? Because when they come home, the schedule doesn't get much easier for the Sixers. They got the Nets when they come home.
It should be huge just because you want to end a road trip on a high note and kind of build that momentum coming into home. And like you said, it's a very tough stretch coming up. You got Brooklyn right there on your heels. There's a mini series with Milwaukee coming up. They see Phoenix again. So kind of building on the strong performance that they had against OKC on Saturday, taking it into this Dallas Mavericks matchup so you can ride the high of, walking away 3-1 on this road trip, coming back home, potentially holding that first spot in the Eastern Conference solely before heading into that matchup with the Nets. It's all good just for the sake of building momentum, especially with the postseason right around the corner. As crazy as it sounds, we're closing in on that home stretch. There's about 18, 19 games to go before we're talking about playoff basketball.
When you think about the Sixers as they do prepare for that playoff basketball, how prepared do you think they are for playoff basketball? You think they're another couple of weeks away? Do you think they need to see what George Hill brings to the table? How close do you think they are to being ready for what the postseason is going to throw at them?
Despite how lackluster, to say the least, they looked against the Pelicans, I would say they're more ready than might be anticipated. Obviously, there's still some things to work out. No team's going to look perfect heading into the playoffs, despite what the roster looks like. I would say the shuffle that you still have to figure out is where you slide in George Hill, because once George Hill is acclimated to this lineup and playing on a regular basis, I think it'll allow Doc Rivers to better shape what his playoff rotation looks like, even though I feel like at this point they might have a pretty strong understanding of what that's going to look like. But just getting him acclimated so that when the playoff rolls around, because that's a guy who's going to be playing some decent minutes in George Hill. So kind of figuring that out, I would say, is really the only main obstacle that they have in terms of getting ready for the playoffs. Because when you have a team that plays defense as well as this, they hung their hat on it all regular season. They're going to hang on it in the playoffs. So I would say they're pretty much all the way there in terms of how they're going to look once the postseason starts.
By the way, it looks like also JJ Redick is expected to make his debut tonight for the Mavs. So that should be interesting for the 76ers to see. JJ Redick, a guy that a lot of people thought, hey, maybe the Sixers could get that guy. And, well, as usual, Sixers Twitter completely misfired on that front. So, but nobody can get it all right. Kevin McCormick joining me here on 97.3 ESPN. Kevin, aside from the specific games today, I want to look forward a little bit because you mentioned that back-to-back with Milwaukee. They got another back-to-back, I believe, is with the Hawks coming up as well. When you think about this stretch coming up, how important is it for them to reassert their home court dominance? Because, yeah, you got the Nets and the Clippers and the Warriors and the Bucks and all these teams coming into your house. But now that Embiid is back, is it important for this team to say, we were the best home team last year. We are still one of the best home teams in the NBA this year. I don't care who's coming in here because let's be realistic. If you can get that number one seed, that means you have that home court advantage. It's not just about getting good matchups in the first, second round. It's about getting that home court advantage. So maybe it's a time to go out there and say, hey, you can't walk in here and just get a win.
I think it could be huge, especially in the Brooklyn matchup, because if you think about it, that is a potential Eastern Conference Finals preview in a sense. So if the Sixers can go on and take care of Brooklyn in that matchup, despite what they may look like, it feels like we've never seen the complete iteration of their team yet. But you might intimidate Brooklyn a little bit saying, hey, if we hold on to this one seed, game 7 will be played here and not on your home court. So I think in that sense, especially, same thing with Milwaukee. That's a team you can see later down the road. So I could say it's pretty big in asserting that home court of, telling these teams ahead of time that whether it's the end of the regular season or when you see us in the postseason, if you come here, it's not going to be an easy night. And like you said, they were a dominant team at home last year. Obviously, in the playoffs, they didn't get to show out at home because of the pandemic and playing in the bubble and such. But I would say that's a key thing they should look to take control of, at least in terms of the psychological warfare that is heading into the postseason against teams like Milwaukee and Brooklyn.
Looking at the teams currently right now, 3 through 6, and maybe you could even say 3 through 7. You would include the Celtics right now. Of the teams in that grouping, removing the Nets, because we know what the Nets are, which of the following teams concerns you the most if you saw them in the postseason? Is it the Bucks or the Heat?
Ooh, that's tough. I feel like, can I say neither?
Really?
All right, maybe not neither. If I had to pick, Miami doesn't really do it for me this season. I'm kind of in the camp that their run last season in the bubble was kind of fluky, and I don't think they've gotten better from their finals run last season. So I guess by default, I'd have to pick Milwaukee. They've been playing really strong basketball. Having Drew Holiday there has definitely been a big positive impact for that. Giannis is still playing on an MVP level, even though he's not really been in the discussion for the award. So I would have to say they're the threat. I still think the East is a 2-team race between Brooklyn and the Sixers, but if I had to pick one team that's pretty right under their tier, maybe even potentially on their heels to insert the tier into the top tier of the East, it would have to be Milwaukee.
I hear everything you're saying, but I'm going to disagree with you for this reason. I feel like Miami is the only team in the Eastern Conference among the teams who are actually going to make the postseason who have a guy who can maybe keep up with Embiid defensively, and that's Bam. I feel like Milwaukee, I mean, what's Lopez going to do, right? You know, I mean, Boston doesn't even have a big man to guard Embiid. The Nets barely have anybody to guard Embiid. The Celtics, I mean, does Capella even count at this point? I don't know. So I just feel like there's one team that has an athletic enough big man to keep up with Embiid, and I think that's Miami. And I think that, you know, Spoelstra and Bam combination is a little scary to me than Mike Budenholzer and whoever big man is going to guard. I mean, unless Giannis is going to guard Embiid for like 30 minutes today, which sign me up for that. I mean, I might just want to watch that just because.
I mean, they've played Giannis at the 5 a lot of times, but the thing with the Bam matchup is, although Bam may be physically gifted to keep up with Embiid and might be, in terms of centers in the East that are going to be able to keep up with the way he works in the mid-range and on the perimeter, Bam would probably be your best choice, but the height he gives up, I think could potentially be concerning. And we've seen Embiid at times just bully smaller matchups. So I think even that Bam matchup, if you're feeding Embiid in the post and he's getting 15 to 20 touches down there a night, that is a matchup that he could still exploit. But I agree. In terms of centers in the East who could give Embiid trouble, I would have to say Bam is either at or near the very top of that list.
Yeah, I know somebody sitting down there like, well, you know, the Hornets are 27-5, and I'm just like, stop. Bro, by the way, can we just acknowledge how amazing it is that the Hornets are the 6th seed and the Hawks are the 4th seed right now? Like, considering how both of those seasons were complete opposites, how the Hornets started out smoking hot and then they lose LaMelo Ball for the year. They're still hanging around. They're not even in the 7 to 10 range. They're in the 6 range. They're safe right now. Meanwhile, the Hawks, they fire their head coach and they go on a freakish hot streak. They're 7-3 in the last 10. They probably could have won 2 of those 3 games they lost. So, I mean, how crazy is the Eastern Conference right now that we're only talking about the top 3 teams usually, the Sixers, the Nets, and the Bucks, but the rest of the Eastern Conference is they're pretty nuts right now.
It is very weird that when you look down the rest of the Eastern Conference playoff picture, you're seeing teams like the Charlotte Hornets, like the Atlanta Hawks, even the Knicks, who have been pretty much laughed at for the past 15 to 20 years, depending on how you look at them. And we're not talking about a team like Toronto. I haven't really been gauging the standings lately, but I believe they're still on the outside looking in terms of the top 8 seeds. So the fact that a team like the Raptors, that still is the talent it does on their roster, technically would be in a play-in scenario if the season ended right now. Meanwhile, the Hornets are like on the cusp of hosting a playoff series after they lost arguably their best player this season. It's been a wacky season, and that is definitely one of those wacky storylines that have kind of weaving themselves into it.
Yeah, for those who don't know, the current play-in teams, your 7 through 10 is Celtics, Knicks, Pacers, Bulls, Raptors right behind the Bulls in the standings. So, I mean, listen, that I like the play-in tournament. I think it's interesting, but I think it's going to be more interesting for the Eastern Conference this year than the West. Last year was the West in the bubble because of all the teams that were involved. I feel like the East is going to be more interesting than the West because I don't think any of those teams can win a championship. I'm just curious to see who exactly can actually come out of that. Although I would like to see the Hornets in that playoff game, just kind of like to see them get knocked out selfishly. But that's just me. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers taking on the Mavs tonight. Doc Rivers spoke to the media earlier, Kevin, and I wanted to ask you about one of the quotes that you put out there about Doc saying the training staff trade different knee braces for Joel. There's no timetable for how long he's going to wear the brace. Should there be any concern? Are you concerned at all that there is this thing with the knee brace, or is this just a side effect of getting the knee bruise and better be safe than sorry?
I would have to lean towards rather safe than sorry. If he had more performances like he did against the Pelicans, I would say maybe there's more of a cause for concern. But the way he came out on Saturday, second half of a back-to-back, and was pretty much immaculate on both sides of the floor, he was without a doubt the best player on the court, and as he should have been in a matchup like that. But the way he was hitting shots all over the floor, he was hitting post fades, he was getting up to block shots, he was still grabbing rebounds. So I would have to say it will definitely be a storyline to follow in these coming weeks. But in terms of the sample that we've seen since he's returned from injury, I don't know if I'm extremely concerned of the situation with the knee brace. And as they continue to tweak with it, I mean, it could get better. Doc Rivers even said himself he doesn't know how long he could wear it. There is the small optimistic hope that he gets it off sooner rather than later. So I wouldn't say it's something to go rushing about the panic button for.
He's Kevin McCormick. Follow him on Twitter, Kevin MCC NBA on Twitter for all of his Sixers and NBA coverage. You can check it out at 97.3 ESPN.com. As all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Kevin, great stuff. Enjoy the game. 7:30. Tom McGinnis on the call here on 97.3 ESPN FM. Great stuff, Kev.
Thanks, Josh. You have a good night.
And of course, our Sixers coverage being brought to you by Trifecta Therapeutics in Glassboro. Maybe Joel Embiid needs to go visit the folks at South Jersey's premier sports rehabilitation and physical therapy center, treating the pros and the Joes. Visit them online at trifectatherapeutics.com. As promised, your texts next here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM. Don't forget, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show here on 97.3 ESPN. And don't forget the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. If you haven't already, download the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free. Thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City, Apple Store, Google Play. Right now, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, you can customize your alerts. So whether you're getting the app alerts now because you have the app, or you're downloading it as we speak, you can go on the app, customize your alerts. You only want Sixers updates? We got you. You want Eagles and Flyers updates? We got you there. You want updates on everything? Just click all the buttons. Or you want updates on South Jersey High School sports? You can customize your alerts right now on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. More Game Night next.
It's Sixers basketball tonight on 97.3 ESPN with the voice of the 76ers, Tom McGinnis, calling all the exciting play-by-play action.
Joel has it again. Between the legs, backs up, shot in the air. It's good. Oh, man. That guy's 7 feet tall.
The Sixers are in Dallas to face the Mavericks. Tonight, coverage begins at 7:30. Philadelphia 76ers basketball on your radio home of the Sixers in South Jersey, 97.3 ESPN. 0.
Coast Roofing and Siding, protecting what you love and own.
Listen up, South Jersey. East Coast Roofing, Siding, and Windows is kicking off 2021 by giving back to our community. We're introducing the 2021 Economic Relief Program. For a limited time, when you hire East Coast to do your roofing, siding, window, or door project, you could qualify for no money down and no payments or interest for 12 months. Plus, when the job is done, we'll send you a rebate check for up to 15% of the cost. That means you won't pay until 2022, and we'll put money back in your pocket. Go to eastcoastroofing.com or call us today at 609-646-1444 to schedule your free consultation. Remember, South Jersey, if you'll call, we'll show up.
East Coast Roofing and Siding, protecting what you love and own. East Coast Roofing and Siding, trust us with your family and home.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We're going to get your thoughts on the text board at 609-403-0973 in just a minute. Also, you can comment as you watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Just follow 97.3 ESPN. Of course, Game Night being brought to my friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Listen, the Phillies might have had only one win over the weekend, but it doesn't mean you couldn't have gotten a little action on FanDuel Sportsbook, because there's nothing better than watching a baseball game with a little action with FanDuel Sportsbook. If you are new to FanDuel Sportsbook, they want to hook you up with a risk-free bet up to $1,000 back if your bet doesn't win. Or if you already have an account with FanDuel Sportsbook, you can get up to $25 back each day if your same-game parlay falls one leg short. There's all kinds of ways you can get on the action with FanDuel Sportsbook. These are just some of the reasons why FanDuel Sportsbook is America's #1 sportsbook. Their app is simple to use, and when you win with FanDuel, they pay you your winnings as little as 24 hours. So download the FanDuel Sportsbook app right now. If you're new, sign up with my promo code Hennig to get your first bet risk-free up to $1,000, and get with the current users of FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can get your same-game parlays back up to $25 if your one leg falls short. Again, it's promo code Hennig on FanDuel Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older to play, and present NJRPA. First online real money wager only for risk-free bet. Refund issued as non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Restrictions apply. See sportsbook.fanduel.com for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, let's get to your guys' text over here. Also, you can chime in on the stream if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter here on 97.3 ESPN, for the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We got guys like Jeff Bone and Pookie watching. EEC watching, Shane 6. So guys over there on the YouTube chat over there. But first, we'll get to the text board before we get to anybody else. Texter chimes in and says, in the later round, sure, best player available usually applies. However, the Eagles desperately need a cornerback and a wide receiver. And unless Chase, Pitts, or Sewell fall into our laps, we have to take a corner or take Devonta Smith. Couple things there. First of all, I'm getting the sense that the reason why the Eagles traded down is because they knew that Pitts, Sewell, and Chase were all being drafted in the first round. Think about it this way. The likelihood right now is that at minimum, 4 quarterbacks are picked in the top 10. Pitts, Chase, and Sewell are picked as well. That means 7 of the top 10 picks are all accounted for. And I honestly think that more than one receiver gets drafted in the first round. I wouldn't be surprised if a team like Carolina drafts a wide receiver. So let's say Pitts and either Waddle or Smith go in the top 10. So that means we've already accounted for 8 picks in the first round, and we haven't even started the draft in terms of positions. Now, it depends on which team they go to. I'm not 100% sure. We got to find out. But the Eagles trade down to 12 because they knew that the only teams that could really upset the apple cart right now are Atlanta at 4, which to me is where the draft really starts, and Carolina at 8 because they traded for Sam Darnold, so they technically don't need a quarterback anymore. So if a team does trade up into the first round, you could have 5 quarterbacks in the top 10. And then if you have Chase, Pitts, and Sewell all go in the top 10, that means 8 of the 10 picks are already accounted for. And I think it's very fair to say that the Cowboys, I would be surprised if they go offensive line or some sort of flashy play. Because, first of all, they've drafted offensive linemen in the first round before. Tyron Smith, Zach Martin. They need help there. They got a lot of injuries on the offensive line. That's why I don't think Sewell gets past them for sure. I think that's the lowest Sewell goes, is there. I think the lowest that Pitts goes, honestly, is the Cowboys too. They could use a tight end. I understand that people say they don't need another offensive weapon, but their tight end situation is atrocious. So I understand them going there, but if I was the Cowboys, I would go defense or offensive line. Jamar Chase, I don't think is getting past the Dolphins at 6. I think there's a high likelihood he can go to the Bengals at 5 to reunite him with Joe Burrow. So that leaves the Eagles with basically a lot of players falling to you, whether it's Micah Parsons, J.C. Horn, potentially Patrick Surtain. I think there's a reason why you traded down, and you desperately need corner. I understand. I don't think you desperately need a wide receiver. I think we're completely devaluing Jalen Reagor and Greg Ward and Dallas Goedert, what they bring to the table. And I think we're undervaluing the wide receivers who are available later in the draft. You can get a wide receiver in the second round and still be a very good player. Remember, T. Higgins and Michael Pittman Jr. were both picked in the second round. Very good seasons last year. Very productive for their teams. You could argue that both of those players were more productive than Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy. Those were the 2 top wide receiver picks last year. CeeDee Lamb, it's hard to hold anything against that guy because he played with a bunch of backup quarterbacks and a bunch of nobodies at that point with the Cowboys. So I can't be mad at CeeDee Lamb. I think he's still got potential. I think Ruggs and Jeudy do too. I just think last year were bad years and situations for them. I think Henry Ruggs was expected to be something that he wasn't over with the Raiders. And I think Jeudy was in a situation where he had his quarterback who couldn't stay healthy or couldn't stay on the field for a variety of reasons. So I think that you can still find T. Higgins in the second round. And I think that this year's T. Higgins, there's a couple of them. Like I said, it might be Rashad Bateman. It might be Rondell Moore. There are other receivers to be found in this draft. So I don't think you have to take him in the first round. And I understand the fascination with Devonta Smith. He won the Heisman Trophy. He played for Alabama. He is smooth as a route runner. He is incredible as a route runner. I'm not sold on the thin frame. I'm just not sold on it. I think that some guy is going to come along and try to blast him, and they're not going to see it coming. The athletes are bigger, stronger, faster, and better than they are even in college. Yeah, you play in the SEC, but the SEC isn't the NFL. Just ask Tim Tebow. 609-403-0973. Dan from Tuckerton chimes in and says, you have a second-year quarterback whom the fan base is on the fence about. So as a fan, I see why you'd want a big, flashy weapon for him to throw to. But I also understand as a football guy, great defense beats great offense. So Dan Tuckerton says you should draft the defensive playmaker. Yeah, Dan Tuckerton, I think that when you think about the defensive side of the ball, I'm so worried about this team becoming one of those teams that was like the Saints in the mid-2010s. Remember, they had Drew Brees for all those years down in New Orleans, but they went 7-9 for 3 straight years because they had nobody to stop the other side of the ball. They were just trying to outscore everybody all the time. And I have a huge concern that I think Nick Sirianni has a chance to be a very good coach. I think his experience of coaching wide receivers and working with different quarterbacks is going to benefit this team. My problem is that I don't know who's stopping the other wide receivers in this division. You got to play the Cowboys, the Giants, and Washington 3 times a year. And you know what? They got some good wide receivers. Kenny Galladay, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard with the Giants. Curtis Samuel signed with Washington. Don't forget about Terry McLaurin. Don't forget J.D. McKissick was one of the leading receivers. He was a running back last year. You don't think he's going to be a weapon used against you? The Cowboys right now have Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Who's guarding these guys? It's Darius Slayton and the law firm of guys you don't want on the field. Seymour, Jaquette, James, Arnold. I think Avonte Maddox could be a good slot corner still, but you need an outside corner. And I understand the fan base is looking at it a certain way. But I think the fan base gets a little obsessed. Are you interested in winning football games, or are you interested in winning your fantasy league? That's what I want to know. Let's get one more text in here at 609-403-0973. Dan and EHT chimes in. So we had Dan and Tuckerton. Now we head down to Dan and EHT. He says, the Eagles need everything. They need defensive impact player, big time, linebacker, or safety. Well, the problem, Dan and EHT, is that I just don't know if they're going to draft Micah Parsons. Okay, I think that you're probably going to end up more with maybe like a Xavion Collins or someone like that a little bit later in the draft is probably your best bet at this point. And then the problem with safety is a lot of the guys who are the best safeties in this draft are not first-round picks. They're not projected for the first round. So I would say that it's just not likely you're going to be able to, make sense. You got a safety second or third round make more sense. But the problem with the safety position is a lot of these guys in the draft this year are very scheme specific. Like Trevon Moehring of TCU is the best safety in the draft. The problem is that I don't know how he would fit in certain defensive schemes. I think he fit the Eagles scheme with what we projected to be, but he wouldn't have fit in the Jim Schwartz's scheme. Whereas Elijah Molden would have fit into Jim Schwartz's scheme, but maybe not into what Jonathan Gannon wants to do. So there's a lot of questions to be answered, and we're not going to get all those answers yet, but I love the conversation. I love the back and forth. I love the conjecture as we are, but 17 days now from the NFL draft? It's pretty exciting. Check out my article over at 973ESPN.com. I'm Josh Hennig. Catch you tomorrow.
It's your chance to win Sports Bash Cash up to $10,000. Enter the code words every day at 973ESPN.com or with the free mobile app. The more codes you enter, the more chances you have to win up to $10,000. Here's the Sports Bash Cash code word.
Noodle, Noodle. Noodle. Enter it now on our website, 973ESPN.com, or use the free mobile app. Sports Bash Cash is brought to you by Jersey Shore Federal Credit Union for all your lending needs. Get the next Sports Bash Cash code word tomorrow morning at 9:55.
It's Sports Bash Cash 10 times a day, every weekday at 55 after each hour from 9:55 a.m. to 6:55 p.m. Listen all day for your chance to win Sports Bash Cash up to $10,000.